today we're talking about leadership, one of my favorite things to talk about. And tell me, Natasha, before we start, do you have a team that you are taking on? Are you doing this solo? Tell me what your team looks like.
I'm currently solo.
Okay.
So it's just me, but I am hoping during the year to sort of start getting a team together. Yes. Yeah. But at the moment it's just me, which is fine. It's good, just me. But yeah, we'll need to grow. So I will need some more people.
Absolutely. Well, you can take all the notes today whilst you're watching live. And if you're watching the recording and you do have a team of people, or perhaps you're thinking about bringing on a team of people for 2023, then today will be really valuable. Today's not going to be all unicorns and roses and rainbows. It is going to be some of the hard stuff that we have to deal with as dance studio owners, some of the hard conversations we need to have in order to make sure that we are crossing all of our T's and dotting all of our I's when it comes to our leadership, because so many of us get into running our own studio because we love dance. We have a passion for dance. Not many of us get into dance studio ownership because we love leadership. It just happens to be something that, comes along with the role. And so whether it's something that, frightens you a bit, whether it's something you feel really confident with, I'm hoping that today I will give you a few little notes, a few little tidbits that you can take on for yourself as part of some conversations that I think are really valuable to have with your team. So as I said, whether you have an existing team already or whether you are thinking of bringing on a team, today we're going to be talking about the ways in which you can serve them the best in terms of your leadership. But welcome everybody. My name is Stacey Morgan. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm recording today and presenting live on Biripi land, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. A big thanks to MDM for having me. Week 3 as we work our way through getting prepared for our best dance season yet. 2023 is going to be a big one. If you missed it last week or the week before, my name is Stacey Morgan. I'm the principal of Port Macquarie Performing Arts and Danae Cantwell School of Dance. I'm also the director of Morgan Media, a podcast production and content creation company here in Port Macquarie on the Mid-North Coast of New South Wales. I'm the president of the Mid-North Coast Dance Association, which is a non-profit which seeks to create performance, workshop and masterclass opportunities for children in my regional area. And I'm the mum to Lucinda, Patrick and Henry, who are all being very well behaved outside and have been bribed with Zupa Dupas today. If they were well behaved, they all get a Zupa Duper. So hopefully all will go well. Thank you so much for being here. In today's session, we're going to talk about the 3 most important conversations you need to have with your team to begin your season. And as I said in the beginning, it's not all going to be rainbows and unicorns today. There is going to be some tough stuff we're going to talk about, but it's important stuff. It's important stuff that we perhaps often avoid. It's important stuff that we don't, we didn't start our business because we wanted to have these tough conversations, but it is very important that we do have them in order to make sure we protect ourselves, we protect our families, we protect our studio families, and we protect the studio as well. So we're going to start by talking about customer service and what our expectations are as a leader for our business when it comes to customer service. We're going to talk about child protection and safety and the importance of making sure that our students are protected, our team is protected, and our studio is protected. And we're going to talk about curriculum and teaching, what is actually going on in our classrooms, and setting some expectations around what we need our team to do in the classroom. So, leadership. I want you to start by thinking about and making some notes on what you need to do this season to make sure you are on top of things, because often we come out of the break, there's so much expectation going into a Christmas break, going into a summer break, thinking, I've got to have all this time to really think about what I'm doing and I'll get things right for next year and I'll get everything organized. And then the break happens and we're relaxed and we're catching up with friends and family. And then all of a sudden the season is upon us. And so that's why we're talking about leadership today, because it's that kind of feeling. We're going into that week that is kind of like, oh, here we go. The train is leaving the station. So what things did you think about perhaps last year? What things did you think about last season? What things did you think about as you were working your way through a really difficult couple of years that you thought, I really need to get on top of this for next year? So write those things down now. What challenges and lessons did you learn from last year that you don't want to repeat this year? Perhaps there were some times where you let down your boundaries. Perhaps there were some times where some dance mums really pushed you to your limit. Perhaps you made some decisions that you would make differently if you had your time over again. But think about those lessons and challenges that you learned from last year that you'd really not like to take into 2023. And I want you to write those down as well. Keep those top of mind so that you can make sure that you're going to make change as we head into into the new year. Of course, nothing changes if nothing changes. So if there are elements of your business, elements of your leadership where you feel like you need a bit of support, of course, you can always reach out to me, but you can always reach out. There's so many great dance teacher networks, small business community networks that you can reach out to, because whilst we sometimes feel alone in our leadership journey, it's often not the case. There are often people all around us who have done the same thing as us, gone through the same thing as us, made the same mistakes as us, and you can always reach out to, to work your way through those challenges. Thinking about what you would like to be better at for 2023. Perhaps there's things when it comes to your leadership in the studio that you'd like to be better at. Perhaps there's some things that make you cringe. There's some things that make you feel uncomfortable. There's some things that you feel you still haven't mastered. I'd like you to write those down as well, whether that's having difficult conversations, whether that's getting on top of your policies and procedures, whether that's making sure that you're across what's happening in all of your classrooms. Have a think about those things that you would like to be better at and improve on for 2023. And finally, how can you help your teachers be leaders in their classroom? I remember I signed up one of my teachers, Miss Ange, for a course that I was doing that was run by HR Culture. It was called Ignite. It was a emotional intelligence course for leadership. And I signed her up, and she got all the pre-course work and the emails that went with it. And she rang me one day and said, I don't think this is for me. I think you've got confused, because this is all about leadership and you're the leader in our business. I'm just a teacher. And I said to her, are you crazy? Like that's absolutely not. You are a leader in your classroom. You're a leader in our dance community. You're a leader as part of the studio and what we do. And she hadn't really seen herself as that. And so she was really challenged by that concept of leadership. But I really think it's really important that all of our teachers understand that they do play a vital role in terms of the leadership in the studio. And so have a think about how you can help your teachers be leaders in their classrooms this year, because that mindset shift, that adjustment, that change of thinking for them can be really important, especially when it comes to behavior management in the classroom, when it comes to making decisions, when it comes to dealing with parents and relationship building. Knowing that they do take on a leadership role and that you see them in a leadership role is something that's really going to help them grow and get better in their role and get more confident in their role, whether that be in the classroom or outside the classroom. All right. Thinking about our business, if you want to grow your business, then we need to do that through our leadership. So whether we're thinking about leading our team, whether we're thinking about leading our students, or we're thinking about leading our community, this leadership piece is a really important piece of the puzzle, which is why we decided to take a whole session today to talk about it, rather than just kind of, we talked about it a little bit last week, but this is really important that we do take the time to really nut it out and go through it, because our businesses don't grow unless we grow. So the learning that you're doing by watching today's video, by attending here live, that learning is really going to help you grow your business as well. And it's really important that you put those two and two together and understand that, because we all have an important part to play when it comes to leadership in our studio. All right, we're going to start with customer service and communication, because that's usually the easiest place to start, because we're doing it every day, whether we like it or not. We're doing it through our website, through our Facebook ads, through the the front door of the studio, through the meeting and greeting and perhaps farewelling of our students in and outside the studio every day. So I want you to think about ways in which you would like to serve and what that looks like for you in your studio, and whether or not you're starting from scratch, whether you're going back into a studio that has lots of students that you've been running for a long period of time. What you set in terms of your expectations for customer service is really, really important. It's important that everybody on your team is all singing from the same song sheet, is all reading from the same booklet, and that the experience that your customers get is consistent. It's really important that we build trust with our customers. That's what keeps them coming back. That's really important to our retention. And how you build trust is through consistency. So doing what you say you're going to do. And if you're thinking about customer service and how you're going to serve your customers, I'd like you to write down some things about what that means to you. So Do you have rules around how long it will take somebody to get back to somebody via email? If somebody sends an email in and says, what color do little Susie's jazz shoes need to be for Tuesday jazz? It's important that they're not waiting 2 weeks for that answer. So what is the expectation in your studio? It could be 24 hours, it could be 48 hours, it could be a week. It doesn't matter. It's as long as it's consistent and as long as it's communicated. And that's why customer service and communication go so well together. So as long as you let your customers know, let's say you're only checking your emails and replying to people every Monday, that's totally fine if that's how it works in your studio, but just let your customers know that. Make sure that's part of your out of office. Make sure that's in your policies and procedures. Make sure that's in their handbook that they get when they first enroll, so that they understand that this is how the customer service in your studio will work. And what are some things that you can improve on in your studio? Perhaps you do have a bit of inconsistency in your front desk or via your email or on your website. What are some things that you know that you could do better when it comes to customer service? Is it perhaps that there are no kind of rules and regulations as to how the phone is answered? Perhaps there's no policy or checklist as to how a student is enrolled for the first time. Perhaps there's no procedure around what happens when a student comes to you for the first time for their very first lesson. All of these little touch points are really important, especially if you're thinking about a dance mum who is coming to you for the first time. Perhaps she didn't dance when she was younger. Her child's been twirling around the living room and, has been begging to go to dance classes, but the mum played soccer when she was younger, so she's out of her comfort zone. The child's really looking forward to it. You want to make that experience as smooth and as easy and as good as possible. So what does that look like in your studio? It's important to set some parameters around what you expect, and then to communicate that to your team, communicate that to the people that are going to be the ones that are going to be executing it on the floor. So thinking about those things that you can improve on, thinking about the ways in which you want to serve, I want you to think about what are the non-negotiables. So in our studio, we have several. And so just to give you some examples, when customers come into the foyer for the first time, somebody needs to greet them. It's not acceptable for someone to come in and for everybody to kind of just look and turn and ignore them. That's not a thing we do at our studio, at either of our studios. So have a think about what your non-negotiables are. When it comes to communication, when it comes to rules and regulations, for us, it's a non-negotiable that if the policy says this, then that's what we stick to. We don't, we don't have a policy that every child dances within their age group. And then we tell, Jane's mum, because Jane's mum's really pushy, that her 7-year-old can dance in the advanced classes for 12-year-olds. That's not a thing that we do. So we make sure that we have policies and procedures, and that those are really well known and really well communicated to our community, our dance community. And then we make sure we follow through on them. We make sure that, part of our non-negotiables are making sure that forms are filled in correctly. So we have trial forms that need to be filled in when someone comes in for the first time. We have enrollment forms that are really important to make sure that we have everyone's details. We have incident and accident reports when something goes wrong. And all of these, things are not the reasons your teachers got into dance teaching, but they are a vital part of the running of your studio. And so you need to make sure that you know what your non-negotiables are, whether that's the filling in of forms, whether that's the greeting of customers, whether that's communication and getting back to people, and really communicate that to your team as you kick off 2023. And finally, I want you to think about how you can surprise and delight your customers, because especially at this time of year, things are competitive. People might be calling your studio and the studio down the road and the studio around the corner. And you want to make sure that you're giving a really beautiful, seamless experience, a really consistent, beautiful, seamless experience for your new customers. And so thinking about ways in which you can surprise and delight, especially at this time of year, are really important. So is it that you can, pull together some old merchandise or some trinkets or a drink bottle or a lanyard or something fancy and put together a little gift bag that somebody gets when they come into the studio for the first time? Is it that you can organize a masterclass or a lesson with a master teacher for your senior performance team that's kind of out of the blue, but they turn up on the first day and they get to be taught by someone incredible? What can you do to surprise and delight your customers, both the new customers coming in for the first time and your existing customers at this time of year, to make sure that they have a wow moment? They have a moment where they They get really reassured that they've made the right decision in trusting you with their child's dance education. And so they, their cup's filled up. They feel really good. The child feels really good, has a great experience. And you know that the team as well are doing the very best that they can in order to make sure that we're thinking about how we can retain those students for the long term, not just for this week of classes. Okay, that's a lot, right? Make some notes. Have a think about what's important to you. Have a think about what you want to do, what you want to make sure that you are doing. And then we're going to jump on into some child safety and protection. Now, this is where things get tough because we need to make sure that in the studio, we are not just thinking about teaching a child to plie correctly. We're not just thinking about making sure they're stretching the back leg in the arabesque. We have to think about the overall experience, the safety experience, the child protection experience that new students and existing students are having in your studio. And as I said, today we're talking about the 3 conversations you must have with your team before you head into 2023. Even if you've had these discussions before, you need to touch base with these conversations again. You need to reach back to these conversations, circle back, as Brene Brown says, to these conversations to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Perhaps you've got new staff members joining you for 2023. They need to be part of these conversations as well. And these conversations need to be documented. They need to be part of your onboarding. They need to be part of your, pre-season staff retreat or your get together or whatever you're doing, whatever works for you, because it's really, really important that these conversations are had and that everybody understands their responsibility when it comes to child protection and safety. So think about how you're providing ways in your studio to protect your students that you have in front of you. So thinking about ways in which you are teaching, so many of us teach the same way that we were taught when we were younger, but there are so many things that do and do not happen now from those old days, different ways that we used to stretch that we don't stretch anymore. I was going to say back in the day, we all wore those parachute pants, but the amount of parachute pants I see in my studio now because they've come back around. I can't make that reference anymore. So there are so many things though in my studio, like stretching in butterfly stretch and ballistic stretching that's go down to the leg and bounce as many times as you can, go down to the floor and bounce. There's so many things that we learnt as students back in the day that we cannot now pass on to our students because we know better. And when we know better, we do better. So what other things can we do to make sure we're protecting our kids in the classroom? Are there ways in which we can make sure that how they're entering and exiting the studio, they feel safe? Are there ways in which we can costume them appropriately to make sure that they are safe on stage, they feel comfortable on stage, they're making sure that they can dance to their very best ability because they're not worried about the costume moving here or moving there? Are there ways that we can protect our kids in the studio in terms of keeping window blinds open, keeping doors open? That's to protect the kids and to protect the students as well. That transparency, as much transparency as we can have in our studio, is really, really important. And so that brings us to protecting ourselves as well, because keeping the doors open and keeping the blinds up, perhaps having your security cameras on, making sure that all of your teachers feel protected in the studio as well. We moved into a brand new studio when we took over a new studio last year, and we didn't have security cameras up yet. And because our teachers were so used to the security cameras we had in our first studio, they were feeling a little bit like this wasn't okay. So I encouraged them to be recording the classes that they were teaching just by putting their phone down the front of the classroom and turning it on, to keep the doors open and to keep the window blinds up, just to make sure that they felt protected in the classroom as well. Because this is about protecting your teachers, making them feel like they have a safe environment. And it's also about protecting the kids and making sure they have a safe environment as well. So it's about the language we use in the classroom. It's about the way in which we address our students. It's the way in which we encourage them. And, going back to thinking about things that we used to do and we used to have, when we were training, it's no longer acceptable to do some of the things that that teachers back in the day used to do. And so making sure that that's really clear to your staff. And, 2 funny examples I can think of from from the past that just don't happen anymore, is those teachers that used to walk around with a stick that they would bang on the floor in time with the music, and perhaps they would also bang it at something else if it wasn't stretched or doing what it needed to do. Or I had a teacher that had really long fingernails, and if we weren't pulling up at the bar, she would come around and she would poke us with those those long fingernails. Again, things that we learnt that we cannot continue on into our studios now, but we need to have these conversations with our team members, because it's very, very important that all the things that we learnt do not get carried on into our classroom now. So you need to be, as the studio leader, really clear as to what your expectations are to protect the children and to protect the team members as well. It's also about protecting the studio. So thinking about things like, do you have a clear entryway for students to come in? Do parents have easy access in and out of the studio to the front desk? Or, are there slippery steps when it rains? Or are there, sharp edges or things that people could slip on? And whilst you think to yourself, why do I have to worry about this stuff? I just want to teach ballet, or I just want to teach my classes, or I just want to build connection with my students. These are important things that we need to think about. So if you haven't done a little bit of a walk around your studio space lately, before you kick off classes in 2023, I encourage you to do that and think worst case scenario. Is this an edge somebody could bump themselves on and hurt themselves on? Is this mat going to be slippery in the wet? Is it something that can fall out from under someone? Are those boxes, those costume racks that are up there, could they fall on someone? Are the bars properly adjusted to the walls? Have a think about these things. Have a walk around and make sure you know exactly all of the things in your studio, and you're identifying all of those risks and making sure you're assessing those risks and managing those risks appropriately. As I told you, this stuff's not unicorns, right? It's not unicorns and rainbows and all the happy things, but it's important stuff, because when these things go wrong, they go really wrong, and it can put not only yourself and your family at risk, but it can put everything that you've built, the legacy that you've built, the studio that you've built. It can put everything at risk. So you want to make sure you get it right. And you want to make sure that this time of the year is the time to be having these conversations, so that everybody is making sure they get it right as well. Do you have policies and procedures around accident and incident reports? Do you have ways that your teachers can and cannot communicate with members of the dance community? Do you have rules when it comes to social media or social media engagement? Do you have ways that your parents can and cannot reach your teachers or get in touch with your teachers? Because it's really important to have all of that outlined, and it's really important that all of your team members understand what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. So if a child, hurts themselves in your classroom and you just say, shake it off, you'll be all right, and nothing gets reported, and then something more severe happens from that student, and then you have to think back, and it's been a couple of months, but the mum's really mad, and the child is damaged forever. Those things are really important. So anytime anyone gets hurt in the classroom, you need to have accident incident reports. There needs to be a system that your teachers are aware of, so that they know what they need to do when it comes to making sure that everybody is going to be protected and looked after. Is there a follow-up process when it comes to those accidents and incidents? You've got to make sure that you're following up with the parents, you're following up with the students to make sure that they're okay. You're making sure that you're keeping in touch with any medical professionals to make sure that your team is across any modifications in training that your students need to have because of accidents or incidents, whether they happen inside the studio or not. There needs to be a procedure around that, and your team needs to be aware of it. In the classroom, I joked before about, the stretches that we used to do that are no longer acceptable for us to do. But, what are you doing in terms of your curriculum to make sure that you understand what's going on in your classroom, what your teachers will be teaching? What are you doing to make sure that, they know the do's and don'ts of what you do and don't do in your studio? And every studio is different. I see some studios doing things on stage that I would never teach my students to do. And I'm sure they see things that I do that they would never do in their studio as well. So every studio is different, but it's really important to communicate what it is that you want to do in your studio, what it is that you don't want taught in your studio, and making sure that that is really clear across the board, so that all of your teachers are aware of what we do and what we don't do. Like in my studio, nobody gets to dance to True Colours. That's just part of my policies and procedures. I'm just joking. That song I feel is overused. And so my teachers joke with me that they're going to put together a True Colours spectacular for me one day. And I keep joking about how we don't do True Colours in our studio. What are the things that you do and don't do in your studio? Please make sure that you are across it so that your team can also be across it, and that it's really clear so that people aren't confused thinking I could do this or I could do that. Also that you don't turn up on concert day and somebody is dancing to True Colours. It's a great song. I shouldn't knock it. But you know those songs that you hear time and time again at competitions and the Stedfords and concerts and recitals? That's the song for me. And think about, finally, when it comes to not just the stuff that happens inside your classroom, but what happens before and after, because we're also, once the parent drops the child off at dancing, we're responsible for them. So if they are getting dropped off out the front and then they're going for a wander to the takeaway store, and then they're perhaps going to the shops over here and then meeting a friend on the corner and then coming to ballet, do we know about that? Is that something that we have, that is acceptable within our studio? Or do we have rules in terms of, students need to come straight in and they wait in the waiting room, or they wait in the foyer, or they line up, against the wall here? What is it that are our policies and procedures around drop off and pick up? Because that's really important. And are your teachers across that? So when it comes to the end of class, those times are busy. You finish class, you're all excited. You line the kids up, give them their stickers, you take them to the foyer, or you take them to the back door, or the drop-off spot, whatever it is, and you dismiss the kids. How important is it? And do your teachers know how important it is that you're making sure that every child is collected by their parents, that every child is, that no children are being left behind? And then because I know that your teachers then have to go and teach their next class. So what's the policy around, Jane's daughter is not here, so Jane's mum is not here. What do we do with Jane in that way? We can't just leave her at the door. We can't, sit her outside and hope for the best. It's not like the old days when we used to just get left in the dark, sitting under a street light, waiting for our parents to come and collect us. That doesn't happen. So please make sure that you have a policy and procedure around drop off, pick up, and safety when it comes to those things, to make sure that you are protected and the studio is protected. And of course, the kids are protected too. That's a lot, isn't it? I'm going to let you process that, because so much of that is stuff that we know, but perhaps we haven't been having the conversations as much as we need to. So I want you to think about the things that you're going to take away from that, the things that you're going to make sure that you're going to talk about, and any policies and procedures that you kind of need to tighten up before we head into the new year. And finally, some more fun stuff. This is the reason we do what we do, right? Curriculum and teaching. So do you have expectations for your team about what happens in your classroom? Do you have expectations about what happens at the very start, what happens in the middle, and what happens at the very end of your lessons? And we talked before about pick up and drop off. That's part of the experience. So what happens from the moment a child comes into your studio until the moment they are dismissed? It's important that that's consistent. You don't want one experience on Tuesday when she's there for tap, and a different experience on Wednesday when she's there for jazz, and a different experience when she's there on Thursday for ballet. You want the child, for the benefit of the child and routine and the stability and the consistency that child needs in order for her brain to work really well and for her to have a great experience. You need that to be consistent across the board. So it's your responsibility as the leader to have that conversation with your team as to the expectations. Just to give you an example, at PMPA, our students enter through the front door, they come into the foyer and they line up on the left-hand side and they wait there for the teacher. We have like a security door that happens at that point. When it's time for the class, the teacher will come through the security door. If it's one of the younger classes, they'll sing our song. If it's not one of the younger classes, they'll take them through to their classroom, through to the studio that they'll be working in. We've got 5 studios at PMPA. So they'll take them to the studio that they'll be working in. And when they get in the room, they either line up on the friendship line, which is a big line that we have across the front of the room, or they will sit in a circle. And that is when we do community building. And this is a really important part of what we do at PMPA. And so whatever you do, whatever you want done in your classroom, you have to make it really clear to your teachers as to what that looks like. So for my teachers, when the kids are in a circle, they mark the role, they have to say their name clearly, they have to, share a fun fact, whether it's, this week we're going to say what our favorite chocolate bar is, or our favorite ice cream, or our favorite thing to do on a Sunday, or who's our favorite cousin, or what's our favorite TV show. Like, we think we pick one of those. And then we make sure that goes around the circle, everybody has a turn. That way the teacher's got the role marked, everybody's in the room, we're all feeling comfortable, we've all made eye contact with each other. Any new kids have been introduced and they're, getting to know how things work. Then we do the warm up, then we do progressions, then we do the routine. And that's the structure that we follow for most of our classes at PMPA. And our teachers know that. So whether they're in contemporary or in tap or in ballet or in jazz, that consistency is there. And that's really important. And then when it comes to the end of the class, everybody has to line up at the door, perhaps not for our senior classes, but everyone has to curtsy. We always do a curtsy and a thank you to the teacher. We always applaud our friends and our teachers at the end of class. And that wasn't something that we always did, but it's something that we introduced maybe 12 years ago. And so it's consistent across all of the classes. The kids line up at the door, the younger kids get their stickers. And for the little ones, I always ask them what their favorite thing they did today was, so that when they meet the parent, they've got something top of mind to be able to say, I did this, rather than mum saying, how was ballet today? And them going, good. Yeah. And that's what is done in our classroom. We then take them to the back door where we do pickups, and we make sure that everybody has been collected by their parent. And if they don't, they go into Studio 2 with the teacher in Studio 2 who has the window that can see the pickup point. And we wait for that parent to pick up that child and for them to be put together. So that's our expectations at PMPA, and that's really clearly written out in terms of we've got a checklist. Do you have a checklist for your studio? Do you have expectations in your studio for what your teachers do before, middle, and after the lesson in the classroom? And if you haven't written it down, I encourage you to do that as part of your homework, and then have the conversation with all your teachers so that everybody's on the same page. Have a think about what you want to improve on in 2023 when it comes to your curriculum and teaching. Perhaps you got to the end of the year and you noticed that, the 10-year-olds pirouettes weren't as great as the 10-year-olds from the year previous. So perhaps there's something lacking when they're 8, 9, and 10 in those preparatory years that you want to make sure you get on top of for next year. Perhaps you want to make sure that, you're spending more time on the concert routine or the Stedford routine, and that last year we didn't get enough time. The time kind of seemed to slip away. So this year you want to start those routines earlier and get organized earlier. I sent an email to all of my teachers yesterday that just said, I'm here to support you. Please let me know what you need. It's our expectation that you have your music cut for your routines before you head into the classroom, that you have your curriculum and lesson plans written out and ready to go. And if you need help with any of these, please let me know, because we have, only a week left until we start classes. Make sure you're reaching out and letting your team know that you're here to support them, but also make it really clear what your expectation is in terms of the things that you want to improve on for next year. Last year we did this year we want to do this is how we're going to do it. Have a think, just like we talked about when it came to communication and customer service, about your non-negotiables. What are your non-negotiables? For us, we don't send kids out of the classroom. So when it comes to our teaching, if someone's misbehaving, we don't say, get out. That's not something we do in our studio. That's a non-negotiable. We do not do that. And if students are sitting down, perhaps they're injured, perhaps they are having a timeout, perhaps they are just having a moment, that's okay. We have a sensory box that those kids who need that can, reach into in order to regulate themselves before they can rejoin the class. Or if they're injured, we have a series of exercises on the wall that they can do. Perhaps they've hurt their foot, so we've got a series of, they can pick and choose. They can do some stretching. They can do some arm exercises. So that's what we have in terms of our non-negotiables. Nothing infuriates me more than getting an email from a parent that says, I'm not paying for last week's lesson. She didn't do anything. She just sat around. I'm able to say, well, that wouldn't have been the case, because I know that I've communicated well to my teachers that that's a non-negotiable for us in our studio. And that she may have been sitting down, but she may have been doing, some tricep work at the same time or something. There would have been a reason behind that. And it's, I can easily go to the teacher and have that conversation, and then have that conversation with the parent. So have a think about what your non-negotiables are in your classroom, and make sure you communicate those well with your teachers. I want you to think this year about how you can make it fun. Yes, it is important that the concert routine gets done. Yes, it is important that we're teaching them to pirouette correctly and spot with their head and pull up their supporting leg. But how can we make it fun? What can we do that's going to be different? Can we, face the mirrors for the first 4 lessons and then in lesson 5, turn and face the other wall? Can we do our progressions across the room instead of down the room, or vice versa? What can we do just to mix things up and make it a bit fun and keep the kids, thinking that things are, always changing and always different, and, giving them a new experience that they can't possibly miss out on. So they want to keep coming back to dance every single week. And then what can we do to go the extra mile? My teachers are so incredible at this, and I'm so lucky, but it has been after, years and years of setting the expectation that where possible, we want to be able to give our students and our customers, our clients, the very best experience possible. So how can you encourage your teachers to go the extra mile? Is it that, one of your teachers likes writing handwritten notes to the students to wish them luck? Is it that one of your teachers is particularly good at picking up the phone and checking in with that dance mum and giving an update on the progress? Is it that one of your teachers makes fairy wands for all of their 4-year-olds for class that they get to keep and take home? What are some things that your teachers can do for going the extra mile? And I, as a leader, always make sure my staff are compensated for things like that. If my teachers are going to spend an extra 3 hours on the phones, calling every parent from their 12 years jazz class to tell them, give them a progress report, I'm going to pay them for those 3 hours. If they're, making the fairy wands, I'm going to pay them for the materials and the time that it took to do that, because it's benefiting my business. It's also inspiring them. If they're doing the thing, I'm not going to say every teacher needs to go home and make fairy wands, but if they feel the need and they would like to, and it's their idea, of course, I'm going to encourage that. And I'm going to encourage it. I'm going to praise it in terms of our team meetings. I'm going to make a big deal of it so that other teachers see, that being role modeled, and then they want to find the thing that works for them as well. Okay, that's a lot. That's a lot from our top 3. So just recapping. Thinking about communication and customer service, thinking about how you will serve, thinking about the things that are really important to you, thinking about the ways in which your customer experience can be consistent, whether they come on to dance on a Tuesday or to come to dance on a Thursday, making sure that they're getting a really consistent experience across the board. Thinking about child protection and what you can do to protect the kids, making sure it's really clear with your teachers how and when, or if not, the way that we do or do not touch the students when we're giving them physical corrections, ways in which we do bring the kids in and out of the classroom, ways in which we protect ourselves by making sure that we have transparency in the classroom, doors open, blinds open, things like that. Make sure you're really clear with your teachers as to what you expect, and make sure that they are heard and that they have an opportunity to be able to stand up and make sure that their concerns are heard and answered as well. And finally, in the classroom, making sure that you have consistency in your classroom when it comes to what the classroom looks like before, in the middle, and after. Make sure that the students can have that that moment of things being fun and things being different, whilst they're all still, they're still learning, they're still gaining all of those skills, but making sure there's a nice mix so that they want to continue to come back to class every week. But they're also making sure that you're following through on the curriculum that you have. They're learning the skills that they need to have. They're getting the routine finished and all of those things, and they're having a good time while they're doing it. All right. So your homework for this week is thinking about what you will improve on for 2023, thinking about when you will have these conversations. And as I said, whether you already have a team or where you're thinking about employing a team, perhaps the when will I have this conversation will happen as part of your onboarding process. And if you can document that now, then you don't have to think about it until the time. Perhaps you're having a staff planning meeting. Perhaps you're getting everybody together for a staff retreat. Perhaps there's some kind of professional development you're doing with your team before the season kicks off. That's a perfect time to have these conversations. Our staff retreat is in April. And whilst we will have a brief conversation about this as we head into at our staff training before we kick off the term, we will have a deeper conversation and perhaps make some changes to our policies and procedures when we do our staff retreat in April. Who needs to be part of this conversation? Is it just your teachers? Is it your teachers and your office managers? Is it all of the stakeholders in the business? Do you want to have some of these conversations with your with your customer base, with your parents? Do you want to pull all of your parents into the classroom? Perhaps those kids who are doing, several classes a week, and explain to the teachers the things that you do in terms of child protection and safety. If that scares you a little bit, then that's okay. Perhaps you can work up to that. But it is really important that they understand what your non-negotiables are. They understand what does and what does not happen in the studio, because that transparency is really key. And have a think about what areas of your studio you could make a little bit clearer, or that you could make improvements on. Is there a mat at the front door that somebody's going to slip on? Is there, a set of stairs that when they get wet, they become a trip hazard? Are there sharp edges in the change rooms? All of those things I know we don't want to think about, because it's not the fun part of studio ownership, but it is an important part of studio ownership. And it is something that is really going to come back to bite you if you don't get it sorted now. So have a think about those things, and have a think about ways in which you can make sure you've crossed all your T's and dotted all your I's as you head into 2023. And next week, we're going to be talking about time management and productivity. If you're feeling burnt out and stressed, or if you were burnt out and stressed at the end of last year and you want to get all of your ducks in a row, then this is my jam. I love talking leadership, and I love talking culture and community, and all the other things we've talked about. But when it comes to like, what am I known for? What do people call me for? It's time management and productivity. So next week is my jam, and we'll be getting stuck straight into it. Of course, follow me on Instagram. I'm at Simply Stacey Morgan. If any of today's content resonated with you, please let me know. Take a screenshot of what you're watching, stick it on your Insta story and tag me, or send me a DM and reach out. Perhaps you want more information about how I deliver that content to my team. Perhaps you want hints or tips on ways in which to address certain issues or challenges you have in your studio. I'd love to help, so please reach out.